something unexpected is unfolding around Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, and it's raising eyebrows fast. Dan Wakeford, a longtime media insider who once helped shape their public image, is now sharing details that paint a very different picture. He previously ran People magazine during that viral cover featuring Meghan's friends, and later continued similar coverage at Us Weekly, which makes his shift stand out even more. Now the narrative takes a serious twist. Reports suggest the inheritance linked to Princess Diana is mostly gone, and the planned polo series is no longer happening. On top of that, insiders describe a couple dealing with growing tension, as their personal and professional goals quietly pull in different directions. The situation is being framed as difficult to repair. That's getting people talking. Dan Wakeford is said to have spent weeks speaking with individuals close to their circle, trying to understand the pressure around their careers and finances. What he found challenges the headlines. Those massive media deals weren't quite as large as many believed, with actual figures reportedly much lower than what was first suggested. Meanwhile, expenses continue stacking up, including major security costs, property payments, and legal matters estimated in the tens of millions. The entertainment side is also facing setbacks. That scripted polo project is now believed to be shelved, and some industry voices claim their involvement doesn't carry the same pull it once did, though others push back on that idea. Behind the scenes, staffing changes have added even more strain, with several departures shifting the dynamic. Altogether, it points to a partnership under pressure, with a growing disconnect that's becoming harder to ignore. There's reportedly one last move that could shift everything for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, but it's the exact move they're least likely to make. Multiple insiders and industry voices point to the same idea: stepping completely out of the spotlight for a while. That suggestion keeps coming up, yet it clashes hard with how they've been operating, which makes the situation even more tense. What makes this even more striking is where the information is coming from. Dan Wakeford, someone who once stood firmly in their corner, is now echoing concerns that have been circulating for months. He's been speaking with people close to their circle, and the picture he's putting together is not flattering. It's creating a moment where past support is now turning into a sharp reality, and that shift is hard to ignore. His latest report lays it all out with numbers that challenge the public image. According to his findings, that widely reported Netflix deal was closer to $60 million once all the behind-the-scenes costs were factored in. The Spotify agreement also brought in far less than expected, with estimates suggesting only a fraction actually came through after things ended early. Meanwhile, Prince Harry's memoir stands out as their biggest financial win, reportedly bringing in a large advance that carried significant weight. Other income streams are mentioned too, but they don't seem to offer long-term stability. Prince Harry's role with BetterUp is said to bring in around $1 million. While speaking appearances that once commanded high fees have reportedly dropped in value, Meghan Markle's ticketed events with high entry prices add another layer, but they aren't seen as a consistent foundation either. The bigger issue, according to these insights, is the spending side, where ongoing costs continue to rise and put pressure on everything. The revenue might sound big at first, but once you look at what's going out, the picture shifts fast. Reports describe income in the tens of millions. Yet the expenses are stacking up just as quickly, if not faster. Their Montecito home alone came with a price tag of around $14 million, and it's believed to involve multiple mortgages, which adds serious pressure behind the scenes. Security is another major cost that keeps rising. According to sources familiar with their setup, protection expenses run close to $3 million a year, with several personnel stationed at the property and additional staff traveling with them. There's even talk that a more modest home, bought outright, could have avoided some of this strain, but that's not the route they took, and now it's becoming a talking point. Legal costs are also playing a big role, and this is where things really stand out. The inheritances connected to Princess Diana and the Queen Mother, once estimated in the tens of millions combined, are now said to be largely used up. Insiders claim a significant portion went toward the house and ongoing legal matters, which has caught a lot of attention and sparked strong reactions. Because of all this, cutbacks are happening across their operation. Staffing has reportedly dropped from a much larger team down to a smaller core group covering key roles across management, media, and advisory work. There's also a noticeable difference in how spending is viewed internally, with one side described as more cautious, while the other is said to be less restrained, focused on day-to-day costs. All of this leads into one bigger concern being raised: how long this pace can realistically continue. The big question now is how long this situation can actually last. Some reports suggest a rough timeline of around 5 years before their lifestyle would need to seriously change, which has people paying close attention. At the same time, sources close to the couple are pushing back on that claim, making it clear there's disagreement behind the scenes. When it comes to their projects, things aren't looking much stronger. That scripted polo series tied to Netflix is being described by some insiders as stalled in development, with doubts that it will ever move forward. On top of that, their overall production approach is facing increased scrutiny. Criticism has grown with claims that attaching their names to projects no longer brings the same appeal it once did. In fact, some voices in the industry suggest it may even have the opposite effect now, which is a major shift. So what options are left on the table? One idea being floated is a return to acting, with reports suggesting Meghan Markle has at least considered it. There were also past opportunities that didn't work out, including a potential creative role with a major fashion brand that could have offered steady income, but reportedly didn't meet expectations. A beauty-related venture was also discussed at one point, but never moved forward, even though some believed it was a strong fit. Then there's the personal side, which adds another layer to everything. Consistent feedback from multiple sources points to Prince Harry feeling unsettled with his current situation. Reports suggest he misses parts of his previous life, including close connections and a more familiar environment. There's also talk that he would be open to a quieter lifestyle, possibly in a more remote setting, focusing on charitable efforts without the pressure of maintaining a high-profile image. That contrast between public life and personal preference is becoming harder to ignore. According to these reports, what truly matters here isn't just money, it's the image of doing meaningful work. But when it comes to Meghan Markle's direction, insiders describe something very different, with a strong focus on visibility and influence, high-level social circles and exclusive events. There's talk she's aiming for a lifestyle that keeps her in elite spaces and major events, though not everyone agrees with that portrayal. There are also claims about what may have driven their royal exit, with some suggesting financial control played a role, particularly around how future funds would be managed. However, sources close to Meghan Markle strongly reject that version, making it clear the narrative is disputed. Still, what keeps coming up is a growing difference in priorities between the two, and that's where things get complicated. On one side, Prince Harry is described as wanting more privacy, stronger personal connections, and possibly even reconciliation with parts of his past life. On the other hand, Meghan Markle is said to be focused on expansion, staying visible, and continuing to reinvent her public image. Those two directions don't easily align, and insiders suggest that gap has been widening over time, which leads straight into the ongoing speculation about their relationship. While some reports try to downplay the idea of deeper issues, the same information highlights clear differences in what they want moving forward. Sources describe Prince Harry and Meghan Markle as unhappy with how things have unfolded, even while maintaining a united public front. There are also claims they function best when focusing on separate paths, which adds another layer to the situation. Altogether, it paints a picture of two people navigating very different goals without a clear solution in sight. The situation being described here is blunt and hard to ignore. Reports suggest they aren't taking advice, and if that continues, the same patterns will likely repeat. That creates a serious problem with rising expenses, no clear long-term plan, and two very different visions pulling in opposite directions. When all of that stacks up, it leaves a lot of uncertainty about what comes next. Uncertainty about what comes next. What really stands out is where these claims are coming from. Dan Wakeford, once seen as a strong supporter through his time at People and Us Weekly, is now presenting a much more critical view. That shift is getting attention because it signals a change in tone from someone who used to help shape their public image. Now the focus is on credibility and what insiders are actually saying, and the details are raising eyebrows. There's also growing debate around how their financial moves are being perceived. Some observers argue that certain public appearances and business decisions are being interpreted differently than before. Choices don't reflect long-term stability, pointing instead to short-term opportunities. Comparisons are even being made to early influencer-style branding strategies, where a wide range of promotions were used to build momentum. That kind of approach can bring quick visibility, but it doesn't always translate into lasting success. At the same time, cultural expectations and public scrutiny are playing a role in how all of this is viewed. Some voices suggest that in today's environment, the lines around branding and promotion have shifted, which can lead to more extreme speculation about what public figures might do next. There are even observations about social connections and high-profile circles becoming part of the strategy, adding another layer to how the situation is being interpreted. Another layer to how their moves are interpreted. All of it feeds into a bigger conversation about direction, image, and what their next step could look like. There's a growing claim that a new strategy is taking shape, and it's getting people talking. Some observers believe Meghan Markle has been studying high-profile family branding models and shifting toward a next-generation focus as public interest changes. The idea being discussed is that attention could move toward their children in a more controlled, brand-focused way. However, that raises serious questions about privacy and boundaries, especially given their young age. Comparisons to other public figures and family branding approaches are also being made, though interpretations vary widely. Celebrity families are coming up more often now. In those cases, the approach was always clear: building a public-facing brand around family life and being open about it. That transparency made the strategy obvious, even if it wasn't for everyone. Here, critics argue the situation feels different, with mixed signals between calls for privacy and selective public exposure. And that contrast is what's driving the conversation. That difference in messaging is becoming a major sticking point. On one side, there have been strong statements in the past about protecting children's privacy and limiting their presence online. On the other critics point to moments where names, titles, or associations appear in public-facing projects, which creates confusion and sparks debate about consistency. That gap between words and actions is being highlighted more and more. At the same time, public perception plays a huge role in how all of this is judged. Some voices say other celebrity families have been more direct about their intentions, openly building a brand over many years without trying to present it as something else. In contrast, the current situation is seen by critics as trying to balance privacy, public influence, and commercial ventures all at once, which can be difficult to maintain. That tension keeps the spotlight firmly on every move, and it's not fading anytime soon. Queen's legacy. Some critics are saying it's better Queen Elizabeth II is not here to witness how things are playing out, describing the current situation as a serious drop in standards. The biggest concern being raised centers around the use of titles in connection with commercial products, which many see as crossing a line and sparking calls for stricter action. The debate over titles is now heating up again. There are growing voices questioning whether those titles should remain in place if they're being linked to personal business ventures in this way. Critics argue that if titles carry historical and cultural weight, then using them in commercial settings changes how they're perceived, and not everyone is comfortable with that shift. Attention is also turning toward King Charles III and what steps, if any, might be taken. There's ongoing discussion about his leadership and whether changes could realistically happen, especially given the challenges he's facing. Public appearances have shown moments of strain, and that's added another layer to the conversation about how much action can or will be taken in the near future. At the same time, frustration is building among those who expected clearer decisions by now, even after major public moments and continued headlines. There's no confirmed plan regarding titles or status, and that uncertainty keeps the topic alive. Watched closely, with many wondering if a tipping point is approaching or if things will continue exactly as they are. A key moment from the past is now being pulled back into the spotlight. The late Queen Elizabeth II's final public days are being discussed again, especially that widely seen meeting with Liz Truss just before her passing. According to accounts from that moment, she was mentally sharp and fully engaged, even while dealing with physical challenges. That detail is important because it shapes how people interpret the decisions she made near the end of her life. One of those decisions continues to echo today: the refusal to allow a half-in, half-out arrangement is being pointed to as a clear signal of how firmly she viewed the situation. Critics now argue that her stance reflected a deeper understanding of what might follow, and they're using current events to back that up. It's being framed as a moment of clarity that set the tone for everything that came after. Recent actions are adding even more fuel to the debate. There are claims about promotional products being circulated to influencers, and the timing has raised eyebrows among some commentators. For critics, this connects back to the larger issue of titles and how they're being used, especially years after stepping away from official royal duties. That contrast is what keeps the conversation intense. Looking ahead, attention is shifting toward the future of the monarchy. Some believe Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, could bring a more streamlined and modern approach, focusing on a smaller core group and clearer boundaries. There's a sense among supporters that changes may come with the next generation, particularly around structure and expectations. For now, though, the questions remain and the spotlight isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Another point critics keep raising is the connection between the children and the UK. There are claims that their time there has been limited, which makes the continued use of royal titles in public-facing projects even more controversial for some observers. That contrast is what's driving strong reactions, especially when those titles appear linked to commercial activity. The biggest backlash is centered on how those titles are being used. Critics argue that involving children in branding decisions at such a young age crosses a line, especially when tied to products. It's being described as a new low by some voices, while others frame it as part of a broader pattern of monetizing status. Either way, it's clearly hitting a nerve and keeping the conversation heated. At the same time, pressure is building around the monarchy's response. Some commentators point out that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are still listed on official royal platforms, which can create the impression of an ongoing connection. That detail is leading to renewed calls for clearer boundaries, with critics saying the current setup sends mixed signals about their role and status. Then there's the marketing approach itself, which is also being picked apart. Observers note that promotional items are being sent to smaller influencers rather than major names, raising questions about strategy and reach. Even the presentation style is being debated, with some seeing it as overly stylized or out of step with modern trends. All of this feeds into a larger critique about decision-making and timing, especially following recent public appearances that already drew heavy attention. Some critics are now saying the timing couldn't have been worse. With a moment meant to honor Queen Elizabeth II, the expectation from certain voices was simple: stay quiet and keep the focus where it belongs. Instead, recent activity has sparked frustration, with people arguing that stepping back, even briefly, seems to be a challenge. The conversation then shifts into more personal territory, and this is where it gets intense. Some commentators are openly questioning Meghan Markle's public behavior, suggesting inconsistency in messaging and a lack of clear direction. Others push back on that kind of speculation, but the debate keeps growing as every new move is analyzed in detail. It's a space where opinions are strong and not always aligned. Attention is also landing on the product itself, and not in a positive way. Early reactions to the candles being discussed raise concerns about quality and presentation, with critics questioning whether the items meet expectations. Comparisons are being made to unfinished ideas or concepts that don't fully come together, and that's feeding into a broader narrative about execution. For some observers, it turns into a bigger metaphor. They argue the issue isn't just one product, but a pattern of launches that don't quite connect or deliver lasting impact. That perspective is being used to question the overall direction and strategy moving forward. And once again, the same suggestion comes up: stepping away from the spotlight for a longer period, allowing time for a reset before making another major move. Some critics feel the situation keeps slipping further, pointing to moments where outfits worn during sensitive visits were later promoted, which didn't sit well with everyone. That kind of move has been described as crossing a line, especially when tied to serious settings, and it's added to the growing list of concerns being raised. Events are also being closely examined, including smaller gatherings that were expected to draw bigger attention. Footage and photos from one retreat, for example, sparked conversation about turnout, with some observers noting the crowd appeared limited. That led to questions about reach and public interest, particularly given the level of recognition attached to their names. Comparisons to past royal appearances are adding even more pressure to the narrative. When people look back at major visits involving other senior royals, they often point to large, energetic crowds and strong public engagement. In contrast, recent appearances are being described by critics as more subdued, with less visible excitement and fewer spontaneous reactions from the public. Street-level reactions are also part of the story. Reports mentioned that some locals seemed unaware of planned visits, while others appeared uninterested, focused instead on their daily routines. That kind of response is being used to argue that the impact isn't landing the way it once might have, which keeps the debate going. There's also discussion about how scenes can appear more active than they actually are. Observers note that security teams, media crews, and photographers can create the impression of a larger crowd even when general public turnout is modest. We're well aware of who they are. That contrast between perception and reality is becoming a key talking point, and it continues to shape how these appearances are viewed. There's also been a noticeable shift in public interest during appearances that would normally draw major attention. In places like Australia, official royal visits have historically brought large, engaged crowds. So when that level of excitement isn't there, people start asking questions. That contrast has been described as unusual, and it's adding to the wider conversation. Some moments from those visits have also sparked confusion. One interaction that's been circulating involves a comparison between social media and highly addictive behavior, while speaking to teenagers dealing with anxiety. Critics argue that bringing up that kind of comparison in that setting felt off-topic and raised eyebrows, especially given the age group involved. It's one of several clips being dissected closely. There's also ongoing discussion about messaging and tone. During the same visit, comments about online criticism and feeling heavily targeted were highlighted again. While some people sympathize with that experience, others feel it doesn't resonate the same way when coming from someone in a highly privileged position. That gap in perception is becoming a recurring theme in how these statements are received. Another point being raised is the idea of public awareness and self-presentation. Critics suggest that constantly engaging with online commentary can shape how messages come across, sometimes making them feel less grounded. There's a growing call from some voices for a shift toward a more balanced tone, focusing on acknowledgement of opportunities alongside challenges. All of this feeds into the broader narrative about image, communication, and how their story continues to evolve in the public eye. The conversation keeps circling back to how this all started and where it is now. Meghan Markle was a recurring character on a successful TV show, then married one of the most talked about figures in the world, and stepped into the royal family with global attention. Critics argue that kind of opportunity doesn't come around often, which is why they question how things shifted so dramatically afterward. Another major point being raised is relatability. Many people watching all of this are focused on their own daily responsibilities, work, bills, family, and real-life challenges. Because of that, repeated comments about public pressure and criticism don't always land the way they might intend. Some voices say what's missing is a clearer sense of appreciation for the platform and opportunities that came with it. There's also a growing belief among critics that this shift in tone is unlikely to happen. The expectation of hearing a message centered on gratitude has been discussed for a while, but many now feel it's just not part of the direction things are heading. That idea keeps coming up as more decisions and public moments are analyzed. And then there's the financial angle, which adds even more pressure to the situation. Reports suggest that tighter resources could push toward more unusual or unexpected moves in the future, which only increases curiosity about what comes next. That uncertainty is keeping people watching closely. So now it's your turn. Do you think their strategy will actually change, or will they keep going in the same direction? Should public figures in their position focus more on privacy or visibility? And how do you see this playing out long term? Drop your thoughts below.